Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That D Plus Show. Class is in session for the only show from that nerdy site lets you know what kind of quality to expect right from the name. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and each week we dive into a different Disney Plus offering, discuss how its history, how it holds up today, and our general impressions. If you like the show, we would love it if you like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Joining me today, we have nobody. It is a solo episode, as has become the tradition, because the week that this episode is going out, I will be doing a belated birthday trip to Disney. And so, as has been kind of my tradition for a number of years now, I usually on these Disney trips kind of pre-record an episode centered around the series Behind the Attraction on Disney Plus. And that is what we're doing today. So we are talking today about, this is Behind the Attraction Part 7 of our series. And this is focused specifically on the Indiana Jones adventure, which is ironic because the Indiana Jones ride in Anaheim will be closed when I'm out there this week to attend the parks. It's closed for refurbishment for some time now. This is part 7, as I said. If you go all the way back to episode 88, that was when I did part 1, which was focused on the Jungle Cruise, Haunted Mansion, and Star Tours from season 1 of Behind the Attraction. Part 2 was episode 107, focused on the Tower of Terror, Space Mountain, and castles. Part 3 was episode 116, Disneyland Hotel and It's a Small World. And part 4, which wrapped up season 1 of Behind the Attraction, was focused on trains, trams, and monorails, and the Hall of Presidents. Part 5, I did episode 209, was centered around the Pirates of the Caribbean ride of season 2. Part 6, last time around, was episode 214. That was the Big Thunder Mountain Railroad episode. And that was a while ago, because I think this is episode 260 of that D Plus show. So it's been almost a year since that last Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, which, yeah, makes sense, because it was probably, last summer when I did that last trip. So, or maybe it might have even been just my birthday of last year. So yes, diving into the Indiana Jones adventure. Why do we pick it? As I said, this has kind of just become the tradition of doing these little solo, standalone, shorter episodes when I do my Disney trips. I'm kind of peek behind the curtain. I'm recording this the night that we recorded last week's episode on Nora, and basically just I stayed up, watched the episode of Behind the Attraction, and am knocking out this episode before I go to bed. Yes, the history lesson here, if you are new to the series, these were originally released. Season 1 was released in 2 parts. The first 5 episodes were released July 21st, 2021. And then the next half of season 1, episodes 6 through 10, were released August 25th of that year. We had a couple year break, and then season 2 was dropped, episodes 1 through 6. So this being episode 3 of season 2. So there's still 3 episodes to go that I can kind of draw on this well if I need to in the future. The episodes typically have a runtime in the 30 to 40 minute ballpark. In the Disney Plus docuseries timeline of things, we had Renovations, April 12th, 2023. Matilda's The Word at Our Feet, or The World at Our Feet, probably, April 26th of 2023. Ed Sheeran, The Sum of It All, was May 6th of that year. Animals Up Close with Bertie Gregory was September 13th, 2023. Behind the Attraction Season 2 was November 1st of 2023. And then it was followed up by A Real Bug's Life, January 24th, 2024, and Choir, January 31st of 2024. There's one of only 3 series that are listed in the docuseries original programming that actually got a second season. The others being The World According to Jeff Goldblum, rest in peace, and not rest in peace to Jeff Goldblum, rest in peace to the show, since that's one of those shows that I believe was pulled off of Disney Plus altogether because they didn't want to keep paying Jeff Goldblum residuals, and so they took the tax write-off or whatever they wanted to do for that. Boo, business stuff. Anyway, the other item that got a second season was Magic of Disney's Animal Kingdom. Though there are a couple other series that have been renewed for a second season, or it had because I took these notes the last time I did this episode last year, may have already had those second seasons. I did not go in and like re-update that, but this was Limitless with Chris Hemsworth, and A Real Bug's Life had been slated for a second season. The director of all of these behind the attraction items is Brian Volk-Weiss, who's done lots of documentaries and comedy specials going back to 2017, including collaborations with Kevin Smith, Joel McHale, Lavelle Crawford, Larry the Cable Guy, and he's also the director of the Toys That Made Us and the Movies That Made Us series for, I believe, Netflix/YouTube, and then Netflix when it got big. And he's done many, many more comedy specials since then. Also, you have notably, again, going back to the first season of this, coinciding specifically, the first episode was coinciding with, or was about the Jungle Cruise ride. It was all released to time with the Jungle Cruise movie. So it's maybe unsurprising that Dwayne Johnson is a producer on this as part of his $7 Productions. He basically produced both seasons of the series. Our cast of characters, Paget Brewster is the narrator, having been in stuff like Criminal Minds. She was one of the later additions in Community, and she was the mom of the triplets in DuckTales, Della Duck, I believe. And then we also have, of course, lots of Imagineers, as always, in this. So kind of going through this episode in particular, we kind of start off learning about the Indiana Jones kind of attraction at Anaheim and Disneyland going into effect, launching really in 1995 as a pet project of Michael Eisner. He came into kind of his role as CEO of Disney back in the mid 80s, alongside Chief Operating Officer Frank Wells, and they very much kind of mirrored the prior dynamic of Walt as the creative and Roy Disney as the money man. This was very much kind of the same dynamic that Michael Eisner and Frank Wells had for a while there. They touch on kind of Michael Eisner coming in, shaking things up, and really wanting to focus in on the parks. And Tony Baxter, Imagineer, who has been featured in many of these episodes, talks about that in kind of that initial pitch meeting for Michael Eisner, he ended up pitching what would turn into Star Tours and Splash Mountain. And then, of course, that Star Tours work with George Lucas ends up laying the groundwork for the eventual Indiana Jones partnership that this episode is centered around. When they were pitching initial ideas for what the Indiana Jones ride would be, the mine cart ride, of course, kind of took center stage, seeing as that was such an iconic set piece of the Temple of Doom films. So they kind of like focused in on that for a while. Meanwhile, Eisner moves over onto the east coast of the country and decides to really push for a new park over at Disney World, specifically the Disney MGM Studios at the time, that is now Hollywood Studios. That opens up in 1989 and features the Great Movie Ride, where ride goers would hit iconic moments in cinema, one of which featured Indiana Jones and Salah with the Ark of the Covenant holding that up. So that was the first kind of debut of Indiana Jones in the parks. And that also kind of coincided with the Indiana Jones stunt show that was created way back then. It was created with Glenn Randall, who was the stunt coordinator for the original Raiders of the Lost Ark. And the story they tell here in the documentary is that he didn't really want to do a live stunt show, so he kind of asked Disney for all these like outrageous things, like, hey, yeah, go ahead and give me like a 400-pound boulder, give me a plane that we can blow up every day, all this stuff. And Disney basically came back and said, yeah, okay, we'll do that. So he ended up having to do this project that he was hoping to kind of weasel his way out of a little bit. That stunt show still running to this day. I got to see it when I was at Disney World a couple years ago, and it was really cool. They highlight here in the video the idea that like it starts out and you're just looking at kind of this wall of like a temple set that has the very obvious like big old trench for the giant boulder. If you're looking at the video version, that's the image that we have kind of pulled up, is the boulder comes down in the opening bit, And then they're like, all right, cut. And then people kind of start walking the boulder back up, and the set kind of comes apart and reveals that there's a whole other set behind it. And so this like Temple of Doom / opening of Raiders of the Lost Ark set that we saw is just like the first act of what ends up being kind of the 3-act structure of this set piece. The second act being a lot of like hand-to-hand Cairo stuff, and then the third act being the kind of fire and like plane spectacle, very much mirroring the airport plane spinning fight sequence that where Marion's trapped in the plane and all that stuff. Very much kind of reminiscent of that, but played out, multiple times a day for the last 30 some odd years. So shout out to that. And yeah, again, I saw it when I was there a couple years ago. It was very cool. And so yeah, it's a lot of fun. Still running to this day. Meanwhile, over in Anaheim, they're still brainstorming what an Indiana Jones ride could be. And they decide like, whoa, maybe we could do this part of the Indiana Jones ride and this part and this part. And we can kind of like play with all sorts of ideas. And then the money people say, hey, you can't do that. That's way too much. So they have to kind of scale it back. And they kind of still don't know necessarily what they want to land on in terms of like, what's the story of this ride? What is the ride of the ride going to be, and what is the story of the ride? But then Imagineering Research and Development kind of lands on this new ride system that ends up largely dictating what the ride is. And it is the ride, if you've ever been on it. It is kind of the current system of a car that is on hydraulics to kind of give you kind of all sorts of motion on the car itself, but the car, the wheels and kind of the steering of the car is programmed very meticulously to a track and is kind of following. So it's programmed there, but you can have the hydraulics kind of giving you a different rocky sensation for the car itself. So that really kind of starts to drive what this new e-ticket attraction is going to be. We get this nice little story. Susan Bonds, being one of the Imagineers that worked with Tony Baxter on this ride, she was kind of the money person. And so she really was working with Frank Wells, the COO at the time, to kind of come in and anticipate the objections that people were going to bring to the table. And Frank Wells really kind of like backed her and said, and this is what we're going to say to them in response. And this is how we're going to really kind of tackle this approach. So it's a nice little Frank Wells story there. Meanwhile, the original minecart idea kind of gets shipped over to what was then Euro Disney, now Disneyland Paris, in the form of the roller coaster Indiana Jones Temple of Peril, which ended up being one of the first inversion coasters over at Disney, i.e. one of the first roller coasters that did like a loop-de-loop and had you going upside down. And they even touch on the idea that in 2000, they actually flipped the cars around and basically ran the ride in reverse for a little while. So it's like, okay, it was apparently constructed to work either way. Coming back to Anaheim, they land on kind of the ideas for it, and they realize they're going to need more space in Adventureland than they actually have. So they get rid of the Eeyore parking lot. And I remember going to Disneyland around that time in the mid 90s. Would have been, 8, 9, 10 kind of thing. And I remember, basically like that whole parking lot just disappearing and going into construction and stuff. And it's funny now because like there's no parking over on that section of the park. That's all just downtown Disney now. But yeah, I remember when you could park that close. Again, this is also before, a Disney California Adventure too. So, but yeah, they get rid of Eeyore parking lot. And they talk about the showbox being built outside of the berm. If you're unfamiliar, the showbox being like the room that the ride's actually housed in. The showbox, the berm being kind of the hill around Disneyland from its kind of original founding that was intended to kind of serve as a barrier between Disneyland and the rest of the world. So it's used to, if you're looking out, towards downtown Disney, you're not going to see downtown Disney. You're going to see the showcase that Disney wants you to see because you're within the berm. But with Pirates of the Caribbean and with Haunted Mansion, they had kind of worked with going outside of the berm before. It's just kind of building underneath the berm and kind of building the, good chunks of the ride underground. And so that's effectively what they do here with Indiana Jones. You end up kind of traveling. You start in, Adventureland right there outside of the Jungle Cruise. You walk like an eighth of a mile down kind of the queue, which has you basically walking underneath the train and outside of the park, but you are, of course, underground. So you don't know that you're outside of the park necessarily. It all still feels like you're inside the park. But in there, you're going back to 1938 Indiana Jones. They talk about, they highlight that there is an Eeyore parking lot sign, Easter egg in the film room of the queue. If you, kind of get up to the front and look, squint kind of way back to the back of the room, you can see it kind of up there very loosely in the back. The ride, they talk about the ride structure again and how like all of the cars have very like independent steering on each of the four tires. They can kind of really, veer it whatever way they want to program it as. And we have Tony Baxter walking through kind of the 1/4-inch model of the ride and talking about kind of the Eye of Mara storyline and the original design. I always forget this part. The original design having... they really wanted to lean into like the places falling apart. So they wanted like this falling rocks effect. And the way they did that very early on and very, briefly before they ended up kind of scrapping this part of the attraction was they had like an ice machine that would like drop, like ice that was like dyed to look like rocks, basically. And the idea was the ice would, hit the ground, kind of shatter, and then like melt and just kind of drain out of the attraction. Didn't really work that way, so they ended up kind of scrapping that because it was causing a little bit more work than they wanted. But they showcase, the backstage areas where the original ice machines still built in there and still, kind of just sitting unused for many years at this point. They touch on the idea that George Lucas's like one real note was he did not want a 50-foot snake in the attraction. He thought that violates all the rules of Indiana Jones. Tony Baxter, fairly, I think, kind of hiding or biting his tongue from saying, well, people's face melt off, so I don't know how locked into realism we want to be. But they kind of come up with this compromise of, okay, well, Tony will put in the 150-foot snake, and we'll also put in 10,000, more realistic snakes around the room to meet George's demand or request, and of course the actual giant snake is the one that everybody remembers. So, what do we have? We have what was probably my favorite. The first time I watched this episode was my favorite, like, aha moment of it is the boulder scene trickery. Because this ride, if you've ever been on it, of course, has to lean into the iconic boulder moment at the end of the ride. And so you kind of pull up and unbeknownst to you, because all the effects are working ideally, the room... like it makes you feel like you're backing up. You see the boulder coming, Indiana Jones is like dangling there. You feel like you're backing up, but what's really happening is the room is backing away from you. So you get that sense of like it's moving further away. And then when you drive forward to drive under the boulder, you have this weird moment of like, well, how do we go down? We were just there. We backed up. And then we went down. I don't know how this makes sense. And it's because the optical illusion and the trickery of the room actually moving, not you moving in that moment. And they kind of showcase it in the model. And it's just one of those really cool, like, oh, holy crap, a little magic trick that they play on you to mess with your mind. The ride opened to much acclaim. Everybody loved it. The queue has become the gold standard for future attractions, all that stuff. But then they touch on the tragedy that Frank Wells passed away from a sudden helicopter crash before the attraction opened, so we never actually got to see it through to completion, but it is still kind of there as a monument to the support and the work that he had done during his time at Disney. Tokyo Disney Sea gets basically a mirrored version of the ride called Temple of the Crystal Skull, which ends up predating the Crystal Skull movie that we would get. The Anaheim, the main difference between the two there is the Anaheim ride is hydraulic, whereas the ride system of Tokyo is powered by electronic actuators, which are easier to program and control, and you can be a lot more precise with those. And then, as is often the case with these rides, they touch on the idea that the ride got revamped back in 2013. They touch on Sharita Carter and Rick Turner improving on things like the bug room and other scenes using the newer technology that has come in the last 20 years, or in the 20 years since the original release or the original launch of the ride, like projection mapping, so they can have kind of a digital mapping of where your projection is going to go, and so they can kind of say, okay, we're going to move you along this very specific path so we can animate, more realistic bugs and stuff to, be a little creepier and crawlier in that sequence. They touch back on the stunt show, talking about the idea that the stunt show, which has been going on since I think 89 or 90 or early 90s probably, in those early MGM Studios days, the stunt show has seen the children of original cast members grow up and join the stunt show. So, a generational show that has been going on that long and can bring in those people like that. Robert Herrick has been the director of the show since day one, at least as of, when this was all recorded, probably 2022, 2023, something like that. And I'm pretty sure he was the guy that was there running the show when I was there and saw it. So lots of fun there. They touch on a little Easter egg on the ride, like serial numbers of the cars, where sometimes those are very specific references to your George Lucas or Tony Baxter, and like it's their initials and their birthday, so you can kind of see that kind of stuff. And then the last thing I call out here, not highlighted in the series at all, but I just always think it's funny because I've now been to Animal Kingdom. The fact that the dinosaur ride at Animal Kingdom, which opened a few years after Indiana Jones in Anaheim, is basically just the same ride, just with a different coat of paint. It's like the same attraction, almost the same track, I believe. And I just think it's always funny that they don't mention it at all in here, to be like, hey, yeah, it's in the same way that like Epcot has like the test track, which is basically just the Cars ride before they put the Cars theming on it. This is the same kind of thing. It's like, well, they had this Indiana Jones ride, and then they didn't, for whatever reason, they didn't make it an Indiana Jones ride there in Animal Kingdom. I guess, fittingly, it wouldn't have necessarily fit in theme to make it an Indiana Jones ride. So instead, they make it a dinosaur ride in anticipation for the 2000 movie Dinosaur. As I looking through kind of Wikipedia beforehand, I believe the dinosaur ride opens in 1998. The dinosaur movie comes out in 2000. Dinosaur movie tanks and flops terribly. And so that's probably why they don't really like spotlight on it. But the fact that the dinosaur ride has just been there and just kept going all these years, very funny to me, until it recently was announced that it will be closed in the years ahead and replaced with an untitled Indiana Jones ride as they kind of move away from the dinosaur land area of Animal Kingdom and put it into, I think they're putting like Encanto in there. They're putting an Indiana Jones kind of area in the park over there. So yeah, this is going to be replaced by an Indiana Jones ride at long last. And I just wonder if they're going to just do it as another like Temple of the Forbidden Eye ride, since it's already that track, or if they're going to come up with like a brand new theme, but still use the same track, or if they're going to actually do like a full new track to kind of update for the late 2020s by the time that ride comes out, I'm sure. So yeah, just funny that the ride kind of exists in that other form, but this doesn't mention or refer to that at all. And again, I get it because this is an episode dedicated to Indiana Jones. Why talk about a dinosaur movie that nobody really thinks about because it, was in that weird era where Disney didn't know what to do with CGI. So yeah. So that's this episode on the Indiana Jones attractions. We talked about kind of all that stuff. As I often do with these report card, I'm a sucker for these, so I'll give it an A. I always just love the behind the scenes kind of stories from the Imagineers and the little anecdotes and bits and bobs they tell. So shout outs to all of that. Extra credit, other suggestions if you like this. We have, of course, our all the other season 2 episodes of or season 1 episodes of the series as a whole. Then you also have the Imagineering story, Magic of Disney Lookout Cay at Lighthouse Point, Disney Insider, Magic of Disney's Animal Kingdom, One Day at Disney, One Day at Disney Shorts, Disney's Fairy Tale Wedding Special, Disney Parks Sunrise Series, and as I always like to shout them out, massive shout outs to Defunctland and their various documentaries on YouTube of the different Disney parks and different Disney eras and rides and all that stuff. They just do great work, and they're always a joy. Most recently, in the time since recording the last one, they did a big dump on animatronics, and that was like a part 1 of part 2 of 2 parts. Late last year, part 1 of kind of their animatronics journey came out, and I imagine here in the months ahead we'll be getting part 2, kind of bringing animatronics into the modern age. So yeah, go shout out to Defunctland and all the great work they do. Extracurriculars, watching anything else on Disney Plus? As we've been touching on, I've been watching the Daredevil Born Again series, and next week's episode we'll be doing on A Complete Unknown. So I will, at some point after I get back from Disneyland, I will be sitting down to watch that and see some Timothée Chalamet as Bob Dylan over on the Hulu side of things. So yeah, that's going to do it for this week's episode of That D Plus Show while I've been away at Disneyland. I'll actually technically be back by the time this episode goes live, but I just wanted to knock this out ahead of time and not drive back, record this, and then immediately upload it the next day. So yeah, thank you for joining me as I did the latest installment here of Behind the Attraction. You can follow me at trevorjstarkey.bsky.social on Blue Sky. If you didn't catch it, by the time this goes up, all of my 40 years of gaming articles would have gone up. It was my 10-part series looking back at my 40-year history with games since I was born in 1985. Recently just celebrated my 40th birthday. I did a look back at 4 of my favorite games from every year of my life. Basically one game each year was the winner, and then a few honorable mentions for each release year. So yeah, go check that out. It was a 10-part series, and then I did do a little bonus write-up about some of the stats of the list. So go check out all those things over on thatnerdysite.com if you are so inclined. Once again, if you liked what you heard, you can follow us over at That Nerdy Site or go to That Nerdy Site for all the latest from us. If you like what you heard, please like, rate, review, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Like I said, we'll be back next week with A Complete Unknown, and Cameron will be rejoining me for that. Thank you, as always. Stay nerdy, be good to each other, and class dismissed.